From Tally to Cali,
It's time
to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
Warchant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source.
And this is Wake Up Warchant, presented by Corner Pocket Bar and Grill.
One more corner pocket.
Now here's Warchant.com's Aslan Hajavandi
And Corey Clark.
Wake up! What is up, everybody? It's Wake Up Warchant, presented by Corner Pocket Bar and Grill, Tallahassee, Florida. Coming up on today's show, deep dive into LSU with Matthew Brune from the BengalTiger, the On3 website of LSU, giving us a lowdown on what's going on in Baton Rouge. The updated top 40, possibly as well. And we'll take a few questions out of the Renegade Express. Wake Up Warchant, presented by the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill, Tallahassee, Florida, 2475 Appalachia Parkway. Also on the internet at cptallybar.com. You can always hit the QR code on your screen wherever you see the Wake Up Warchant graphics. It'll take you right to the website. You can find out the social calendar and the daily lunch specials. Since it's Tuesday, you already know this. Trivia going down tonight. Before that, though, the lunch special would run from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on most days. But since it's Tuesday, Bill's like all day, I got you folks. Taco Tuesday at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. Hard shell, soft shell, chicken or beef. World's your oyster at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. Go check it out. You'll love it. Trivia is always fun time, always a good time. Is it the same person? Is it the same like DJ Corey that hosts the trivia, or is it a revolving door of astute people?
It's usually one guy, but occasionally Bree, who actually is a police officer, used to be a waiter at the Corner Pocket, now is a police officer. She'll host it too occasionally. I would say she does it once a month, at most, and then he does it all the other times, unless you and Stephanie are doing it. Oh,
that was a fun time. We should run that back.
Maybe on the off week we will. Maybe on the bye week we'll do a war chant trivia.
I'm there for it. I am there for it. All right, so yeah, we have a 30-minute, I think almost a 30-minute preview, if you will, just kind of going through everything with LSU. That'll be in the middle of the show. Check out the show notes to find out when we start talking about that. Hit a thumbs up, leave a 5-star rating review, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Also, you should point out that on Friday from 4 to 6 is the annual Jeff Cameron / Warchant appreciation party at Corner Pocket.
This Friday?
Yeah, it's weird that we're not ever told about it, and we work at Warchant. But hey, this isn't the Howard Stern show. We're not going to go behind the scenes and complain about coworkers. But so this Friday 4 to 6 is the Jeff Cameron, and I guess technically it's the Jeff Cameron show, and you don't work on that,
right?
So, but I think if people showed up for that, it's an all-encompassing party. And I'm going to actually take some Vitamin Energy swag.
Nice.
To give away. In fact, I'm going to be giving away boxes of it.
Ooh.
I think, right? I think that's a play to make, right?
Okay.
Lord knows you and I have enough that I want to give a few away to the people to get them hooked on it. Well, that sounds bad.
Make them earn it.
Yeah. And also, hooked sounds like it's an addiction. It's not that, but you're gonna love it once you shake it and take it.
Exactly. And don't forget, Saturday before the Florida State LSU game, live edition of Seminole Headlines, a happy hour going down at Hooch Bar in Orlando, wallstreetorlando.com. Get tickets to the block party. I think it's $20 for one day, $35 for both days, Saturday and Sunday. Post-game show going down live on site at Hooch Bar. Jeff Cameron, Tom Lang, pregame show, postgame show, Gene Williams, Tom Lang. So it's going to be great, everybody. Come on out, enjoy the show. Over on the website, Corey, there was no practice Monday, no practice today. They'll be back at it tomorrow on Wednesday. So we were thinking about this top 40 now that we've been blessed enough to watch practice as much as we've been able to. Speaking to Matthew Brune over at the BengalTiger, apparently I think maybe like 6 or 7 practices Brian Kelly opened up to the media to be able to watch. But once they start resuming practice here in a day or two, they'll be in like Florida State game plan mode,
right?
And they will not be allowed to watch practice. It'll be locked down. So, they might be able to talk about injuries in detail right now in depth charts, but they don't get to see practice the entire year the way we do. So,
right.
It's a give and take, everybody. But anyhow, this top 40 thing, giving you folks something to talk about over on warchant.com. I kind of felt like Marshawn Lynch on this one, Corey. I was there just so I didn't get fined. I like my top 40. I don't want to apologize for anything.
Sure.
But, I guess looking at it, there was maybe a couple omissions. Some guys I perhaps did not value as much. Let's start with you, though, Corey. Looking at your top 40, who are your 3 players that, reassessing you might want to recalibrate and maybe move up or down on your top 40?
So I'm going to make an executive decision. Not that I'm the executive of this show. I don't think we should give away all three.
Okay,
I think people should be on the site to read all three and to read everybody else's trio. And also, I guess maybe I didn't read the assignment well. Could we also have also had a mulligan for somebody that we ranked too high? Because that seems rude. I don't know if anybody did it. I don't know if you did it.
No,
I did not. I used all my mulligans for people that I ranked too low.
Okay.
And so with that in mind, because I've written a column, by the time this comes out, I'll have written a column that I think will be on the website for most people when they listen to this about Destin Hill. That's my bit. That was my number one without a doubt. There's some other people that I didn't rank that looking back I should have. Including, because he's not on my list, Kyle Morlock probably. Probably should. I think Kyle Morlock's going to be a pretty big factor in this offense, and I did not have him in my top 40 just because he's the third string tight end. But they're going to play their tight ends a lot, and I think he's going to be on the field a lot, especially in the red zone. So, should have had him ranked, and if I could do it all over again, he would. But Destin Hill, did not have him ranked at all, and then I think just watching the last 2 weeks of practice – in what he's done, in the way they talk about him, which is what my column is about, I would probably have him in the mid-20s. I think I'd have him as my third receiver. Wouldn't you at this point? Like, obviously, we know who the top two are. Right. Johnny and Keon are my top 6. But after that, I think Destin would be my third guy.
Dude, Span might have something to say about that here in last week or so, but you're probably right because Winston Wright – still going to need to see consistency out of him to really totally fully buy in. I did not have him on my top 40. I did not pick him as one of my picks either. So it sounds crazy. A guy that's not played organized football in a game competitive situation in years could be the third best wide receiver option for you on this team that's completely loaded. But you're probably right. You're probably right, Corey.
Yeah, so again, that what he does physically, the fact that they love how hard a worker he is and how much he loves football, he's like I don't know, man. He's just assimilated so quickly to everything. He does not look out of place at all.
When the offensive line coach is shouting you out, that's
he's the OC. He's the OC too, but yes, he does not work with Destin Hill nearly as much. Clearly, he's not in the room with them nearly as much as he is with his own charges in the offensive line room, and he could even see. And he's the one that works with the hardest workers on the team, in my opinion, and he can even see that in this kid is just it says so much about what his potential could be, not just for his career, but by the end of this year. Like, I could envision a scenario if Florida State's in Charlotte, Destin Hill might lead them in receiving in that game. I can envision a scenario where that happens because they are going to do everything they can, and they won't be able to. But every defense that Florida State faces is going to do – they're going to bend heaven and earth to try to stop Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. Now, good luck. It's not going to happen, but that will be at the top of their scouting report on every single week. And then there's the other kid, number 7, who's just going to be really hard to stop in the middle of the field if that's the role he ends up taking on this team. It's I think he's definitely one of the top 30 most important players on this football team, and he might be higher than that by the time the season's over.
All right, I don't disagree. I mean, I put Destin on my list at 40. He probably should be higher than that. So I didn't want to pound my chest on putting him on my list because I put him at 40, and I didn't really want to pick him as moving up and down the chart because I assumed as much that would probably be your mea culpa. So we'll let you ride it out on it. For me, I guess in a roundabout way, I kind of am handing out demerits, but for me, it's Keziah Holmes. On the first go-around, I actually – I put him on my list the first time I just was hacking out names. I just started typing out everybody's name or who I want. I went 1 to 40 and just started plugging in names. I'm like, I think he could mess around and emerge and be maybe one of their top running backs by the time November rolls around. But then I'm like, am I really going to put 4 running backs on this list, especially one that hasn't even done anything in the spring? Couldn't play last year because of transfer rules. So I kind of walked it back. But the more I watch this team perform, I'm not saying they're going to be pass first, but this is going to be a very dynamic, prolific passing offense. They're still going to run the ball. That's still going to be part of the mixture. But I just think that like Lawrence Toafili isn't going to get 2 or 3 consecutive drives to work into a rhythm. And I think they've got enough receiving talent, whether it's receivers or tight ends, that this offense doesn't need to scheme up plays for like Lawrence the way they had to in Clemson in 2021. I always thought Rodney Hill was like a more natural fit to be the number 2 running back in terms of like carries. Maybe not explosive plays the way Lawrence can pull it off, but just felt like at some point Rodney might be that number 2 running back behind Trey. But at this point, like Keziah's kind of emerged. I think everyone not named Trey has lost value to a certain degree in my book. And I think Keziah's might even be primed now to take that role in my mind of being like the number 2 running back in terms of carrying the ball behind Trey Benson. So I didn't have him on my list. I probably put him somewhere in the 30s, like the top half of the 30s. So that was my my omission that I wanted to maybe get right on.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure I agree with it. I mean, I agree that I should have had him on my list too. Like I think he's going to be a contributor on this team. I don't know that I'd have him much higher than like mid 30s, just because I do think Rodney Hill, Toafili, and Trey Benson are going to be on the field a lot, and I don't know where he etches his role in for this team if everybody stays healthy. But if they don't, man, he's going to be a valuable weapon. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if you'd call him a 4th string running back, but I think when we did this list in June or July, whenever it was, we all assumed he would get the 4th most carries on the team as for running backs. Yeah. I don't know if there's another school in the country that has a guy like that who would be quote unquote their 4th string running back. He is a talented kid, and I do think they will find a role for him. I just, like you said, there's one ball. And there's not a lot of touches to go around, and Trey Benson came back for a reason, and it wasn't to watch Keziah Holmes get a bunch of carries. So I do think they're going to – and Toafili is just such a unique guy. And then Rodney Hill, who knows what he's going to be, man. He might end up being really good. So I wonder where his place is on this team. But he is certainly better than I thought he was, right? I think everybody that watches practice can agree on that. He's got some stuff to him, man. He's not just a big kid that can move a little bit. He's got some wiggle. He's got violent cuts. It's hard to know how well he breaks tackles, only because we never get to see people try to tackle him. But I assume we'll get to see that soon enough.
Yeah, I think the pie chart for like running backs, like Trey's going to keep his lion's share, but whatever that piece of the pie that I had in my mind for Rodney and Lawrence, like a sliver of it's been removed from them and then put into the Keziah Holmes color of the pie chart that I have in my mind when it comes to it. I love Lawrence, but I think sometimes we almost talk about Lawrence like he's Marshall Faulk, and like I don't think he's Marshall Faulk. So I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get in terms of like they're going to bring him in specifically to line up at slot and have some crazy mismatch, and he's going to be able to bust a 60-yard catch and run off. I don't know if they're in that position to need that. So like, where does he fit in? Because Trey's going to get carries. Rodney's going to get carries. Again, I think Keziah's maybe kind of shown that he can maybe do some tough running for them as well. So I just think and then again, man, like throwing the ball, they've got Rodney and they got Johnny and they've got Keon and they've got Destin and they've got Morlock and Biscuit and Jaheim. It's just like there's a lot of dudes. And I just think the running backs, those 3 running backs in particular, are going to maybe kind of remove some value from each other, at least the way I thought about it in June. So prove me wrong, though. I will. Everyone copy this down. So when Lawrence does bust off a 60-yard catch and run against Clemson in Death Valley again, he'll take the deed to that stadium, and we can laugh at me.
So last year, Toafili had 93 carries in 13 games, so that's an average of 7 a game, and he also had 24 catches. So 107 total. 117 total touches in 13 games. So 9.5 touches per game is what Toafili got last year. To me personally, I would just be stunned if it was less than that. Oh. I don't expect more than that, but I expect around the same. And look, man, he had 457 yards rushing. Wow, did he really? That's a pretty good number. Yeah. I mean, he averaged 5 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns, 457 rushing, and then he had another 268 catching the ball. That's pretty good, man. That's over 700 yards of total offense. Only averaging 11 touches a game. I think he's more unique maybe than you're giving him credit for. Nobody thinks he's Marshall Faulk, but I think, and also he should be better, right? Like that's the thing. You're supposed to get better. He was certainly better in 2022 than he was in 21. And now let's see if that progression continues. And again, I just think he's a guy that will be on the field. He's proven he can do it. He is a matchup guy. Just coming out of the backfield, he's a matchup problem. And then, but still, so Trayshawn Ward last year had 95 carries. So do we think that Keziah gets all of those carries?
No, I think Rodney cuts into it too, man.
Yeah, so then it's like, okay, well then there's really not much. There's not much left to cut into as far as the carries. If Rodney Hill's getting, Trayshawn averaged 9.5 carries per game. Toafili averaged 7 carries per game. Looks like Trey Benson averaged about 11 or 12, probably 12 carries per game. So, there's not, and then Jordan's Jordan. So there's just not going to be a lot of running options. But I do think, and we talked about this last week, if Benson gets an ankle, if he tweaks something, if he's out for a quarter, or he's just not, if he's in concussion protocol, knock on wood, all this stuff, that is a really good replacement back for the tough yards.
Yes.
We think, right?
Yes.
We still haven't seen it. But, man, though in practice, because we know he's big, and we just assume if you're big, if you're 215, you're going to be able to break tackles. Well, not everybody that's 215 does do that. But if he can break tackles at a pretty good clip to go along with the athleticism that I don't think I knew he had, then that figures to be a good running back that at worst is a really nice replacement for Benson as a big back if something happens to Benson.
VitaminEnergy.com. Shake it and take it. Not even 2 ounces in a bottle. It'll give you 7 hours of energy packed with vitamins that exceed your daily nutritional value needs. Tastes great, too. All the options over at vitaminenergy.com. Use the promo code WARCHANT, BOGO, B-O-G-O. Buy one, get one free. How about the berry flavor, Focus Plus? Again, packed with vitamins, improves your mental acuity, dial in, focus, crush the spreadsheet, crush your workout, crush being in the car line to pick up your kid, and buy one and get one free. Just take a shot of it. Let the energy carry you. Let the vitamins nourish you. It's all over at vitaminenergy.com. They're giving you the hookup with that promo code WARCHANTBOGO, B-O-G-O, because they're Noles, and they want to hook you folks up because they like you guys, because they're one of you. So go ahead to vitaminenergy.com. Give it a shot. Use that promo code WARCHANTBOGO. vitaminenergy.com. Energy with benefits. Matthew Brune talking about them Tigers coming up after this. Out in Baton Rouge covering LSU, we got Matthew Brune here joining us on the show. Matthew, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So, I don't want to use the word boring to characterize Florida State's preseason because it's been great to see how, well they've been performing seemingly here. But it's been boring in terms of, there hasn't been any major injuries, which is a good thing. But I think coming into the camp, most of us had been covering the team here and seen the way they finished last year and the way they kind of progressed through spring and the pieces they added. We're like, all right, they're going to have a really good offense, a really, really good offense. Their defense is probably going to be better as well. And this coaching staff has stayed intact, so they got that sort of cohesion. So everything's kind of gone according to script. The offense has looked really well. The defense has looked better. And we see this coaching staff just figuring things out really easy. Has it been the same thing for LSU? Have there been any surprises? Because there really hasn't been any surprises here in Tallahassee. Everything's kind of gone according to plan. Has things gone according to plan in Baton Rouge from what you saw in spring and we're anticipating going into camp?
Yeah, through the past 2 weeks, we've been able to watch a lot of fall camp. So you add that into what we saw throughout spring and summer and stuff like that. I definitely wouldn't say it's been boring here from day 3 when there was a brawl and the Malik Neighbors and Kyron Lacey got kicked out of practice. They're fine now, but that was a funny fun incident, I guess, to watch because media was able to be there for those practices, and so we were able to get a good glimpse as to what this team is and see if we could answer the question marks we had at running back in the secondary, see how the quarterbacks played with Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. So there were still a lot of questions that we had to answer. I don't think all those were answered. Like we saw on Saturday, we were able to watch a scrimmage. We were able to watch them practice again. And in that time, really, we saw more changes in the secondary, more, kind of the offensive line maybe taking a player or two out in the starting lineup. So Still a good amount of questions. I will say it was exciting to watch the top end guys like Malik Neighbors. I thought was fantastic, much even better than what he was last year as a 1,000-yard receiver. Then you get to Harold Perkins and Omar Spates at linebacker. I think those guys are elite. Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback had good camps. So, yeah, it was overall, I think, a good camp, and I don't think it was crazy, but it sounds like it was more eventful, I guess, than Florida State's.
Yeah, probably accurate. So, I don't want to go through every single position, but we're going to go through a lot here, Matthew, because everybody wants to know what to kind of anticipate for this game September 3rd. But I think quarterback is obviously settled with Jaden Daniels. Florida State's got their quarterback situation settled as well. But, we were talking about it off air about, I just think that Florida State just seems to be such a tough matchup for any team offensively, what they can do. And I think they're going to be better defensively. And I just see the way a game playing out over 60 minutes. I just feel really good about Florida State. And I'm surprised that LSU is favored. But, we go back and look at last year, how tight that game ended up being. It was decided by a extra point being blocked. But it seems like maybe the biggest difference, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like maybe the biggest difference if you're an LSU fan or if you're a Florida State fan and needs to maybe pump the brakes is that LSU offensive line that started in, Caesars Superdome against Florida State last year looked completely different than what it ended the last year for LSU. Where are they at right now in terms of the offensive line? I saw that Zalance Hurd, a true freshman, is trying to get some run here. Is that a good sign, a bad sign? How would you assess the offensive line for LSU right now and maybe compare it to where you thought about them going into week 1 last year?
Yeah, week 1 last year, this was the case for the entire roster, obviously, when you bring in a new coach and then you have just so many holes on the roster. You have to remember at this time last year, we didn't even know what Jaden Daniels was going to be. So, but yeah, offensive line especially, that was a group where we had no idea what it was going to be. And then Florida State killed them from snap 1 to snap 80, just lit them up. And from that point on, Cam Wire was a starting tackle, took him out, started Will Campbell, Emory Jones, 2 true freshmen locked down the tackle spots. The guard spots were kind of in flux a little bit too. They found starters there. I think there were 5 different starting lineups in the first 6 games for LSU on the offensive line. This year, they returned 5 of their 6 starters, basically 5 of the 6 who started games. And then you mentioned Zalance Hurd. He was a top 20, top 15 player in the country, 5-star, all the accolades and stuff out of Monroe, Louisiana. They bring him in, and he is pushing for a starting job, and I think that's a great thing because I think he's a better prospect than what Will Campbell and Emory Jones were. He's that level of player. So I think there's a good chance he could start at right tackle this year, and that's a great thing because then you build up more depth and you're obviously in a good position moving forward to where your offensive line has great continuity, but also great talent on it. And I think that's, like you said, that's one of the biggest differences in this year's team to last year's team.
He's 6'6", 340 as a true freshman.
Massive. Dude, he's massive. And so you wonder at tackle if if he'll be quick enough. But then we talk to defensive ends and defensive linemen on LSU, and you're like, no, he's quick enough. He can do everything. Once he gets his hands on you, it's over. Again, I talked about Will Campbell, and he's all SEC preseason team and all that stuff. Zalance Hurd is a higher ranked player, was a higher ranked prospect, bigger, stronger, all this stuff as a true freshman. And so obviously as a freshman, he'll have to pick up a lot of things. And so you don't love starting true freshmen there, but that's certainly not a bad position to be in for him to be pushing for a starting job.
His headshot on the LSU website, he looks like he's 24. He looks like he's a 6-year senior. It's incredible. Yeah. Keeping it on the offense, Malik Neighbors was, I don't know how many people outside maybe the LSU sphere knew about him going into last year because Kayshon Boutte was the man, yeah. Right? He was projected first-round pick. Florida State fans, me included, were biting, chewing their fingernails over how you're going to be able to stop him for 60 minutes. And they pretty much did. I think you didn't really
everybody stopped
until the fourth quarter, right? So yeah. That kind of worked out. But they have Neighbors. You mentioned he had a 1,000-yard receiving season. But, behind him, I know Karen Lacey's a guy that transferred in a few years ago. Brian Thomas, a large target for them to kind of be able to look for. But, behind Neighbors, do they have that kind of caliber of receiver that LSU fans have been accustomed to for the last, 10, 12 years? Does it seem like, Lacey can be that guy, or is this really going to be kind of neighbors and fingers crossed, at least for the first few weeks until somebody maybe emerges?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I wrote about that after the scrimmage. Was Malik Neighbors solidified himself to me as he's going to be one of the best receivers in the country. I think a top 5 receiver in the country. And I didn't think that maybe going into fall camp, after seeing him dominate fall camp the way he did, he's the best player on LSU's team right now at this point. Malik Neighbors is. Now, after that, Brian Thomas Jr., 6'3", 6'4", I mean, awesome athleticism, back-to-back 400-yard seasons. Everybody's expecting him to put up, 700-800-yard season there. He didn't have an awesome fall camp. He's good, not great. Kyron Lacey, similar type of thing, good, not great. So I don't think they have a true second guy that's like, wow, this is an all-SEC guy, But if Thomas and Lacey can just be good complement pieces to Neighbors, I think Neighbors is going to, light up the stat sheet this year. And then you get to, if you go even deeper into the depth chart, I think Aaron Anderson, transfer from Alabama, who's from New Orleans, spent 1 year at Alabama, got hurt, so didn't even have a chance to really play over there. Comes to LSU, and I think he's the 4th best receiver on this team. I think he's going to be really good. 5'8", versatile slot piece for them. They didn't have that last year. So he's kind of a name that I'm looking forward to seeing as well.
Running back wise, I know they're true freshmen. Sounds like this past weekend, Caleb Jackson was starting to maybe kind of flash a little bit. I know Noah Cain's there. John Emery's the guy that, people were talking about last year and how things change. I don't know if they've got, the next Clyde Edwards-Helaire or, Leonard Fournette in that backfield, but I know LSU always seemingly has a good running back and it works itself out. But is there a guy right now that you're looking at or has emerged from camp that you're like, all right, that's the guy that's going to tote the rock and be a problem probably for opposing defenses?
No, but this is probably the most unique running back room, at least in recent LSU history. There are 8 scholarship running backs in this room, and they returned Josh Williams, who led them in rushing last year, who was a walk-on early in his career. So he's your leading returning rusher. You add Logan Diggs, transfer from Notre Dame, who had 800-plus yards last year. So he's had the most production last year, and he's fairly young going into his 3rd year. So those are the 2 I pencil in as being the top 2 backs. Then you get into, like you said, John Emery and Noah Cain. I think those are 2 actually really solid pieces in a room. So that's 4. Then you have 4 more. And like you said, Caleb Jackson, true freshman, might be like the most talented of the entire group. He got hurt his senior year. That's why his ranking kind of dropped if you look him up on the recruiting services. But I think he's a bona fide, player at running back. Trey Holly, Louisiana's high school all-time leading rusher, is in the room as well as a freshman. Armani Goodwin's been hurt, but he's really, talented. And then Trey Bradford is also in the room. So you have 8 running backs. I think the 4 that I mentioned are kind of the top 4. Caleb Jackson's going to be in the mix as well. So you got 5 that I feel good about. But none of them I would say are even close to that RB1 Leonard Fournette, type of running back.
All right, let's flip to defense now. I think for Florida State, the front 4, you feel really, really good about if you're a Florida State fan. And, that's always been LSU's kind of calling card, is just how strong they've been up front on the defensive line. I want to say we know what they have with Maason Smith, but I don't know if we know what they have with Maason Smith because, he was the player that got injured last year on the first drive for LSU, just an absolute gargantuan-sized, quick, athletic freak of a defensive tackle coming off a major surgery here. But Mekhi Wingo does come back. They've shored up a lot of pieces through the portal. Where is the strength of the LSU defense? Is it the front 4, do you think?
If Harold Perkins was considered an outside linebacker, I would put him in that group. But considering they've moved him more to an inside linebacker spot over the offseason, I'm saying him and Omar Spates as those inside linebackers, I think that's the heart of this defense. I think that's the biggest strength because Omar Spates, for those who don't know, all Pac-12 first team last year at Oregon State, 4-year start at Oregon State. Like, that is a legitimate starter at the P5 level, and I think he's going to be really, really good this year. So you pair him with Harold Perkins, who is obviously an elite pass rusher, playmaker extraordinaire, and you have a really good balance there. Greg Penn also returns, who was their second leading tackler last year, and he's probably third he's the next man up in that group. So I feel great about the linebacker unit there. Front four would be kind of the next in line. Mekhi Wingo and, like you said, Maason Smith. Maason Smith is an interesting spot because of throughout fall camp over the past 2 weeks, you could tell they've been kind of tentative with him to a degree. And he has had some moments where he's kind of like taken a second to where he got maybe scared or something like that because of the knee or ankle or something. But you hope over the next 2 weeks, if they can get him to a place where he can just play 30-40% of snaps, that's enough to impact the game at a high level, because last year they didn't have him really at all. So that'll be the interesting thing. Mekhi Wingo is also an all SEC player in the preseason, so you have your defensive tackle spots locked down. They brought in a bunch of transfers to kind of round out that defensive line room, but you have those two. Savion Jones is the defensive end who I think is going to be really solid this year, and at the jack spot, which is their outside linebacker, kind of a rusher to a degree, Von Miller type role. Braden Swinson, Ovia Gofu, two transfers in. They're solid. I don't think they're elite. I don't think they're second-round draft picks like B.J. Ojulari was, but they're solid. And if Wingo and Smith are on the defense line, then they should have some opportunities.
How does Brian Kelly handle questions about Maason Smith? Like, is there any way to read? Are there any tells by the way he talks about Maason Smith to where you think, they feel good about being able to get 30 to 40%, of the snaps out of him? Or is it, they think that maybe he's further along than where he should be in his rehab process? Yeah, early on in camp, he said you could tell by his body language and by what he said that he thought he was, fine, 100% ready to go. And we had heard over the summer and even to a degree in the spring that he was ramping up really, really quickly and he was going to be fine. He went down about a week ago during 11-on-11 and kind of, you could tell it wasn't serious, but he was kind of scared in the sense to where it's like, all right, I don't fully know if I'm 100% ready here. And since then, all Brian Kelly has talked about is that everything's clear. It's, nothing, structurally wrong or anything like that. He just went down and we'll see moving forward. So the next 2 weeks will be interesting to see because I do think that is a game-changing type of player. And if they don't have him for even 30 snaps, then that changes kind of how this defense operates. Yeah, I think the LSU defense operates kind of largely like Florida State in terms of 4-2-5, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew. It's pretty much kind of 4-2-5-ish. Yes. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the outside linebacker can be how it is. It's a 4-2-5, 3-3-5, whatever. That outside linebacker rushes 90% of the time. So, yeah, 4-2-5. So for Florida State, like their linebackers, maybe not the most naturally gifted athletes in the country. I mean, Kalen DeLoach has got some great athleticism, but we haven't seen him maybe put it all together for an entire season, but he's definitely capable of it. So I kind of diminish the value or the impact linebackers can make in this day and age in college football because everything is a similar type of way. Just in terms of, I think obviously defensive line is the most important thing. Yeah. Obviously, not to get too far ahead, but yeah, I think Harold Perkins, how they use him specifically is something we don't even know at this point because it's like they're gonna blitz him, they're gonna rush him a good amount of times. But their whole thing is we don't want to just line him up at outside linebacker and let teams load up on that side to block him. They're trying to be more versatile with him. So how they use Harold Perkins in the context of talking about the linebackers is something we don't even know at this point. I don't even know if the team fully knows how they want to do it yet. Sorry, no, man. I just think that if there is one guy out there in this day and age that can impact the game at linebacker, maybe it was a Will Anderson last year. I don't know if Harold Perkins is that guy, but you're able to see scrimmages. I don't know if they deploy him in scrimmage situations, but what have you seen when they have used him that makes you think all right, I mean, I know you mentioned everyone naturally thinks put him on the outside, just let him pin his ears back and rush as fast as he can. But I mean, does he wreak havoc even in scrimmage situations from what you've seen out of him this camp? Yeah, I think the biggest thing, he's worked with Matt House, the defensive coordinator and linebackers coach, basically for the past 7 months, almost exclusively on trying to figure out how to maximize him at inside linebacker and how to teach him, I think, basically to be an inside linebacker. Because even in high school, I mean, he was a running back. He would have been a top 5 running back in the class out of high school. And so on defense, he just went and kind of got the quarterback or got the ball, basically. Yeah. Then obviously there's a lot more nuance to playing linebacker that he had to learn and stuff. So I think it's a very fair question is
even if he's developed, you still are in a situation against Florida State where you have to get to Jordan Travis. You have to disrupt them. And having Harold Perkins drop back in coverage even 20% of the time feels like it's too much. So that's going to be interesting. But in the scrimmages and what we've seen throughout fall camp, I do think they are being more versatile with him. They're blitzing him plenty. And I think he's going to be a real asset in the run game and containing any quarterback runs as well.
I think everybody listening to this podcast, like, all right, ask him about the secondary already, Aslan. Ask him about the secondary.
Do it.
I don't want to come from a place of judgment here. We've got a guy from Albany. We've got a guy from Division II Shorter on our team that worked out well. But like when you hear that LSU needed real big time help at, the defensive back spot, namely cornerback. I mean, they had to bring in a transfer last year from Oklahoma State to kind of fill a gap, and they had to kind of repeat that process again. But you guys had to go to SELA. You had to go to Southeastern Louisiana to grab a guy, Syracuse to grab a guy. Sage Ryan goes down. He's a guy that, maybe was going to find some kind of home, a little bit of a role. What's going on in the secondary? How much of a concern do you think it is for the team and you covering this team and looking at it? Does it seem to be a point of concern right now as we're, like 2 weeks away from this game almost?
Yeah, I could talk about the secondary for about 15 minutes, but I'll keep it fairly short. Like you said, last year,
more space, Matthew, as much time as you need. We're curious over here about
we're not in a rush at all. Not in a rush. Clear the schedule. I last year you mentioned it. They had Jarek Bernard-Converse from Oklahoma State, who was an all Big 12 player, and then Micaiah Gardner from Louisiana Lafayette, who was a solid player over there. And they not only stayed healthy, well, there was no depth in cornerback room. It was those two or nothing else. They stayed healthy, and they were really, really solid last year for them. So that was one of the biggest saving graces for this team, was those two held it down start to finish. They were really, really solid. They leave. Their whole cornerback room leaves except for one player, LaTerrence Welsh. So they have to basically bring in a whole new room again. Deuce Chestnut, like you said, from Syracuse, 2-year starter there, really, really productive player, but still, comes over here. Zy Alexander, Southeastern, you mentioned. LaTerrence Welsh returns. Denver Harris is the big name here, though. 5-star, top 30, top 40 player in the country out of Houston North Shore. Went to Texas A&M for a year, got kicked off the team. They bring him over to LSU, and my belief going into the fall camp was that in order for this team to get the most out of their potential as a defense, they need Denver Harris to be a starting corner and be good, because he was good at A&M before he got kicked off the team. But
when did he arrive? By the way, Matthew, when did he arrive? Did he come in time for spring?
Yeah, he was here for spring. And there were no problems in the spring. He was operating with the second team a little bit and so on and so forth. Fall camp starts, and Denver Harris is still working with the second team and the third team, even to a degree. Like, he was not pushing for a first team spot, so we weren't sure exactly how this was going to go. There was the fight the third day of practice, which very much involved Denver Harris and the receivers. And so you're like, all right, what exactly is going on here? And then about a week later, maybe a few days later, he's not at practice. He wasn't in the team photo. And a lot of people are like, all right, did he get kicked off the team? He was probably disciplined, but the way Brian Kelly phrased it, Brian Kelly always has to direct us in the one direction. He's like, he's dealing with personal matters, and he'll be back next week. So he returns for the scrimmage. We assume he's going to be on the team and ready to go, but it doesn't look like he's going to be starting, and that's very much a blow, I think, to this team's ceiling, because now at corner, you really don't have a ton of great options here. As much as I like Zy Alexander, I think he's cornerback one right now, and he is about 6'2", good length. Like, I think that matchup, I'm not saying he can match up with Johnny Wilson in he's going to lock him down or anything like that, but he at least has some size to a degree to where if he's in position, he can make a play. And I think he's been good. He's battled Malik Neighbors a lot of camp this year. So Zy Alexander there. After that, Deuce Chestnut's gotten a lot of second-team runs, but Sage Ryan was in the mix there. Ashton Stamps, a true freshman's in the mix there. So that's a real concern. And then I do think at safety, they're pretty much fine. Greg Brooks, Major Burns come back from last year, 2 starters. They had Andre Sam from the portal from Marshall, who was a really good player over there. So they got 3 safeties they like, and then they're kind of mixing in maybe Brooks down at nickel. they're fine, I think, at safety and kind of at nickel. But yeah, the cornerback spot is the biggest concern right now.
I'm not going to make a prediction or anything here, but let's just talk out the way this kind of game plays out, or just questions that maybe you even have for Florida State. But I feel like defensively, Florida State likes their front four. I think LSU likes their front four. I think you guys probably like your linebackers more than Florida State likes their linebackers. I think you guys like your safeties more than Florida State likes their safeties, but Florida State likes their cornerbacks more than LSU likes their cornerbacks. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, going to this conversation with you again, I still think Florida State's going to win. I would pick Florida State if I had money to put down on it. How much of when you think about this game is it based on what you're seeing from this team now, what you're projecting, and how much of it are you looking back and thinking about that game last year? Or are we wasting our time thinking about last year when we're trying to figure out how the way this game's going to play out in 2 weeks?
We might be wasting our time, but I think there's real value in thinking about obviously what the game was last year and how they almost went to, they could have gone to overtime with, just the litany of mistakes and the litany of limitations that team had last year in game one, I should say. But I don't think we're wasting our time when we consider how good of a coach Brian Kelly is and what I think he can do and what he did last year in taking them from game one to game three to beating Alabama, to going down the list of how competitive they were throughout the year. And then you reach your limitation as a team where you go up against A&M and you just don't have the defensive line depth finally wore down, the linebacker, just all that kind of broke down. So I think there's belief here in that Brian Kelly is able to get the most out of his teams, which I think he did at Notre Dame as well, obviously for, considering the maybe limitations there. And so with the top end talent LSU has, it's like Brian Kelly you would think can get the most out of this group and put them in a position to where Florida State doesn't have the major advantage of knowing what they have. Florida State doesn't have the advantage of Jaden Daniels, not knowing his receivers, and Kayshon Boutte running a route and not even knowing the ball's coming his way and hitting him basically in the side of the head. Like, it's those type of things you hope as an LSU fan that, basically those are all ironed out, and you have a ton of returning talent. The depth is still a question mark to me at a lot of spots, but as far as top end talent goes, I think this game is awesome because it has some of the great players in the game right now in college football. So, that's where I think we look at last year and say, all right, I don't want to take too much from the game specifically, but at the same time, the game showed from a physical standpoint, LSU is there, like talent-wise, I think they're there. And now it's putting it all together for year two under Brian Kelly going into this one.
What side of the ball last year grew more, developed more, do you think, from week one until that shellacking of Purdue in that bowl game? Because, for me, I would think, I think about Matt House. I think about him having an NFL background. I'm sure there's things that he wanted to do defensively last year. They probably weren't ready to deploy and really run full speed. And maybe there's some of the guys who are banged up on the back end, and that limits what he can do. But I would feel like there has to be so much more cohesion and understanding of what is being asked of you on the defensive side. Or was it Jaden Daniels, the offensive line, figuring out the best five and Jaden Daniels getting a little bit more comfortable? Was that the biggest step? Did the offense or the defense kind of grow the most last year? And which side of the ball do you think is going to be maybe the bell cow or carry and be the redeeming part of this team this year?
Last year, I think the offense grew more, but the defense at its peak was really, really, really elite. I just think there were games last year where the offense, Arkansas, Auburn, like you look at the final scores of those games, and I think LSU scored 13 against Arkansas, 20 against Auburn. Like, the offense was very limited and the defense was just not letting anything happen. I think Matt House is a really good coach, and he proved that last year, where you have a bunch of, I don't want to call it scrap pieces, but a bunch of transfers, freshmen. You don't know what you have with Harold Perkins. Maason Smith goes down and he's able to construct, I think last year I said it was, top 3, top 4 defense in the SEC pretty comfortably. So that's very encouraging. But last year you look at, again, where they were game one compared to where they were against Alabama. Where they were against Purdue, Georgia to a degree. Obviously, you have both quarterbacks play against Georgia, but by the end of the year, the offense is in a much better position. They still weren't consistent, but they knew what they were, at least at that point. So I think that's the interesting thing. And then going into this year, it's hard not to feel good about this offense, but at the same time, they don't have an elite running back. We'll have to see if there's a second elite receiver on this team. There could be, but we don't know. And also Jaden Daniels, we haven't, talked about him too much, but because he should be a known commodity. But at the same time, you need Jaden Daniels to take a step forward. Not a huge step forward, but he has to take a step forward in order to fulfill the predictions of everybody at basically in the SEC of first team all SEC, in the Heisman picture. He has to get better from what he was last year, because if it's the same quarterback that they had last year, there are limitations, I think, to what this offense can be. So overall, I think the defense is still in a really good spot. Kind of what I mentioned to you off air and even on air, it's top heavy to a degree. They need Maason Smith. They need Mekhi Wingo, Harold Perkins. They need the safeties to stay healthy. They need the corners to stay healthy. So still question marks there, but overall, I think they're in a good spot because of the top end talent they have.
It's like a 3-point spread, I think. It's going to be a fourth quarter game again, I feel like, right? Probably, Matthew, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I would be surprised if either one got that blown out. But hey, is Orlando technically a home game? You're gonna fill it up. It's gonna be all.
Yeah, I think Florida State. I mean, it was pretty 50-50 in the dome.
Yeah, it was
year.
awesome. It was awesome, and though I went into it thinking, and obviously I'm young novice, whatever. But I was like, it should be LSU 80-20 or something like that. It was awesome because I don't know if they sold the tickets that way, how it works, but it was right down. I'm not right down the middle, but 60-40, something like that. It was awesome. So I hope, similar type of thing this year. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, it's crazy. Both teams close their season out in Orlando. Now we got to open the season in Orlando. We were the Cheez-It Bowl. You guys were whatever bowl, VRBO, whatever it used to be, whatever it is now. So
I don't know what it is now.
We're running back. The one clash of top 10 teams in week one, man. We can't wait for it. Matthew Brune, check him out over on the BengalTiger, the LSU site on the On3 network. Thanks, man. We appreciate the heck out of you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
MyBookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, and use the promo code WARCHANT when you sign up for an instant cash deposit bonus. Yeah, that's all you got to do. Just sign up, show up, use that promo code WARCHANT, deposit some money. They'll give you some cash based on a percentage of what you've deposited. Tightening up slightly. Again, we've seen it at 3 points at some books. Our guys at MyBookie now have the game at 2.5. Florida State getting 2.5 points in a neutral game that's kind of a quasi-home game against a team with a lot of question marks. Curious sort of pick. Maybe we'll talk about it later on the show. But go to mybookie.ag where you can bet anything, anytime, anywhere. They've got the sports book. You can bet on games. You can bet on futures, whether it's Heisman winners, national championship winners, conference winners, all sorts of NFL props out there as the boys on Sunday get ready for their season to start. And there's a live casino that you can also dabble in. It's all there over at mybookie.ag. Again, use that promo code WARCHANT. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere at mybookie.ag. All right, Corey, so, wish you could have joined us, but, you're out there crushing life. It just...
Wrap it up. Give me some bullet points.
Exactly.
Everybody just listen to it. I want to hear some bullet points from you.
He likes their top-end talent. Like, he thinks they're top-heavy, which, I can see it. Like, they got a good quarterback. They've got a really good tight end. They've got a couple pieces on their offensive line. Will Campbell, this, freshman sensation from last year. Obviously, Harold Perkins. If Maason Smith is right, which they're saying he's right, they like. So... But still, it doesn't match up to what I think Florida State has depth-wise. It just seems like they've got way more question marks than Florida State has. And I know it doesn't really work out that way. It's all about matchups and how things go ahead against one another. Because, if Maason Smith, if they can get, 25 snaps out of him and he can wreck 15 plays out of that, they probably think that's a win. But it's just that's not the LS. I don't know how much of this is reputation-based. And Random_John was saying – to us, with everything in mind here from last year's game, this year's game, what is it about FSU that has the very intelligent Las Vegas line setters putting FSU as an underdog against LSU? And is it a brand name thing, Corey? So much of this is, Duke basketball gets a certain kind of cushion when it comes to setting lines. Alabama football does. I don't think LSU is in that sort of, tier. But is it beating Alabama last year, looking kind of good? Although they lost to A&M, that just nothing adds up to me on this, which makes me a little bit kind of nervous. But they do have talent. I mean, but they just don't have Landry and Beckham. They have Neighbors, and then they're hoping somebody else can step up at wide receiver. They have running back by committee, but nobody special. Their cornerback situation is banged up. They've got safeties at return, so even that isn't where Florida State is, because Florida State has cornerbacks you feel really good about and safeties that you're like, we'll see. But you feel much better about Florida State safeties if you're a Florida State fan than LSU fans feel about their cornerbacks. But, it's week 1, both teams clean slate, and LSU did grow so much from week 1 to week 13 last year that I guess maybe part of it affects the way Vegas is setting the lines. So.
Yeah, I've had a really hard time trying to figure out the line too. Like if I was an odds maker, I would have it flipped, honestly. Yeah. Not just because I just think, like you talked about, LSU has more question marks. They probably maybe when it comes to the NFL draft probably have a few more exclamation points. Like they have some, like the Perkins kid is undeniable. But then so is Jared Verse. But I think they have other guys like the tackle that's going to be a sophomore and that tight end. Those guys might be first-round picks in the future. They're immensely talented. Maason Smith is immensely talented. He is. I think he's more talented than any of the interior defensive linemen that Florida State has. But is he healthy?
Right.
And that's one guy. I just think when you look at Florida State, and again, you were talking about the most experienced team in the country, legitimately one of the most experienced teams in college football history. It is not Jalen Ramsey, LaMarcus Joyner, Deion Sanders, Rashad Green, Kelvin Benjamin. It's not all these great college football players, but it's a collection of really good college football players that have won and played a lot of football games. And I feel like it's going to be a pseudo home game for Florida State. No, it's not Doak. But I mean, it's that stadium. I mean, good grief. It should have been condemned years ago, kids. But it's not just that. LSU will travel. But I feel like last year, that was a neutral site bowl game atmosphere.
Yep.
I mean, it was 40,000 FSU fans, or 38. I mean, it was as close to half. It was like the Georgia-Florida game. It was half one side, half the other. I don't foresee that being the case with this game. I think it'll be 75-25.
Ooh.
I mean, I just don't like this LSU. I mean, all those fans, they have real road trips they want to go to during the season. I don't know that Orlando, 2 weeks after school started, in the late August, on a Sunday night, I just don't know if that's going to be as inviting as New Orleans was for Florida State fans that hadn't been there in 20 years. Plus, LSU was just there. LSU, like those fans that would go to a game like this, wouldn't they also have gone to the bowl game in late December? Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know that Orlando is attractive to LSU fans as New Orleans was to Florida State fans because of, all the things you can do in New Orleans, folks. But so I just think it's going to be more of a home crowd advantage for Florida State. I think they have the better quarterback. I think the defenses are – I think Florida State, when you look at what they did last year, and I know they struggled at the end of the year – you look at what they did so did LSU, though. Yeah. And I think they bring back more, and they also brought in more. I just don't know how you would look at these two defenses and these two quarterbacks and make LSU the favorite. But which means that LSU will probably win by 30 points. Who knows, man? I'm so bad at gambling, it just doesn't make sense to me that LSU would be the favorite. Because, again, I don't go to the Purdue game. Like, if you just judge by bowl performances, sure, man. LSU had a much better bowl performance than Florida State last year. Great. But I judge like the whole season, especially the end of the season. And LSU wasn't good at the end of the season on defense. They lost it. They gave up almost 40 points to that A&M team who didn't score 40 in a month. So I don't understand. I think they do have more question marks. I don't think Jane Daniels, he's a fine college football quarterback. He's not as good as Jordan Travis. They don't have as good a wideouts as Florida State. Maybe their offensive line's better. Maybe their defensive line's even. But I don't know, man. I just think Florida State's got more weapons, and it's a pseudo home game.
Yeah, Matthew was pointing out that he thinks that LSU had kind of worked itself into being an elite defense, towards the midway point of that season.
What happened?
Yeah, I don't know. It's they held Auburn to 17, but I mean Auburn was a trainer. I mean he cites they held Auburn to 17. They held Arkansas to 10 points. But it's like, yeah, man, but you allowed 35 to Florida. You allowed 38 to Texas A&M, and I know Florida State allowed whatever. Was it 38 to Florida?
I mean, similar, right?
It was in the swamp, but it's just like and looking at the numbers here, there's nothing that LSU's defense, I mean, other than rush defense, and neither were really anything to brag about. Florida State was 74th or 5th, and LSU was 62nd, but LSU's total defense was 40th, and yards allowed. Scoring defense was 30th. Meanwhile, Florida State's total defense was 14th in yards allowed and 20th in points allowed. And I know schedules and talent have to play with all that kind of stuff, but I just don't know if this LSU, a team in this day and age with that many question marks at cornerback, Maason Smith this will be his first game back, almost, I think, 365 days since he got hurt, but not went through all of his rehab. Just it doesn't add up to me.
To me at all. And, I go back to that A&M game. They gave up, I'm just looking at it now. Where was it? Where'd it go? They gave up 274 yards rushing in that game. Yeah. Like, I know that kid for A&M's a good running back. The A-Chain. A-Chain. Man, come on, Judge. You know how many carries that kid had against LSU last year?
What, 32 or something?
38.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Good job, Jimbo. So, hey, use them while you got them, folks. Smoke them while you got them. He ran for 215. So they ran for 274 yards as a team. And also, the Connor Weigman, the quarterback for them, was 12 of 18 for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns, which was a great outing.
True freshman, too, I think, right?
Yeah, 12 of 18 for 155, and then ran for 274. That's crazy. So, I don't know that they were elite. I don't think Florida State was elite defensively last year either, but I know they weren't. Yeah. And I don't think they brought in a Jared Verse type that could change a defense, or even a Braden Fisk type. They might have. I know they brought in the linebacker from, I think it's Oregon State, maybe?
Correct, yeah, Omar Spice. That's the thing. They love what they are at linebacker. And I'm just like, well, I'll take what Florida State has on their front four and the fact they don't have a dearth of like a huge glaring question mark on the back end of their defense over having elite linebacker play. So
yeah, and look, I think when we go back to those rankings, I think are the odds. They did get up to number 4 or 5 in the country, right, before they got upset by A&M. So maybe it's just that's on pollsters' minds. So okay, they were number 5 in the country. People were talking about them getting into the playoff.
Right.
And so that's still fresh on, I guess, odds makers' minds. You can look at the A&M game as an anomaly, and then they lost 50-30 to Georgia. Well, everybody lost to Georgia, so no shame in that. And then they beat the bejesus out of Purdue. So I guess you could look at the A&M as just like a one-game slip-up. But it's just, again, when you look at not just that they lost to Georgia, but how they lost to Georgia. They gave up 530 yards. They were down 35-10 at half. That's not something that fills you with a lot of hope that they're going to be a dominant defense. Georgia ran for 268 against them, or 255. And Bennett threw for 274 and 4 touchdowns, and I don't think he threw more than 1 or 2 passes in the second half. Like, he threw for almost 270 yards in one half, and then they ran for 255 too. I don't think they're an elite defense. I honestly think Florida State will be the best offense they play, and they have to play them to start the year. So that's not a great, maybe a combination. But again, I'm probably thinking too much about it. I don't think LSU is going to be one of the best defenses in the country. Best like top 10. I don't think they're going to be elite. I think they'll be good. For all we know, this will be the best defense Florida State faces too. It's just, man, you like facing good defenses when you have Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, Toa Feely, your man Keziah, Morlock, in an offensive line that has like 300 combined career starts.
Well said.
Thanks, buddy.
89 Noles. Let's package this one with a question from a few days ago that I forgot to bring up on the show. But our guy, Grumpy BK, was asking his annual question of who's the vocal leader on the team on each side of the ball. To which, in practice, we don't get to really see it. They're in a huddle, but it's usually the coach is giving them instruction. The only time we'll really see it is like when the quarterbacks are doing individual drills, and then they'll go from being outdoors into the IPF, and Jordan breaks them down, but it's just like, all right, Q's on 3, Q's on me, 1, 2, 3, QBs. I haven't seen a lot of fiery Disney-like getting on each other's backs to step up and grind things out. But I think Jordan has the confidence to speak up if he has to at some point this season. It's leadership by committee, but yeah, I don't know if there's like that that guru, that emotional heartbeat of the team, but maybe Corey does. But let's also, Corey, if you don't mind me throwing this in as well.
Okay.
89 Noles, love the show, great work, fellas. Locker room culture seems to play a big part in this team and this program's demise. Back in 2017, last year's team appeared to display a new culture, which translated to wins. Based on what you've witnessed, has there been one specific event, player, or coach that has led to this improved culture? If so, please provide background. Thanks, Bobby. You getting Mike all fired up after the Louisville game? Is that the one event?
Yeah, is that what turned it around? Yeah. Man, look, I think it comes from the top down, but I think I've said this before, but if this thing ends up going to a great place for a long extended period of time, I think you can look at somebody like Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas, but especially Johnson, as being a guy that kind of showed the way, man. Like you have to understand how devoid of talent in NFL. I mean, look at the last 2 NFL drafts, man. Like this team had nothing really redeeming talent-wise for the 2 years before Jermaine Johnson got here. And then you look at that, he's a first-round pick. He works as hard as anybody else on the team. He also just shows them a blueprint of what it looks like. And by all accounts, loved the team, loved the program, loved the coaching staff, and was a really good teammate. And so, I think that can, by osmosis or whatever else, can trickle down to the rest of the players. I think if you want to look at one player, I think you could look at him as being very, very impactful for where this program ends up going, if it goes to those great places, is because they saw a great player, because they didn't get to see a lot of them in their own locker room anyway. They saw plenty on the fields on Saturday, but in their own locker room, there wasn't a lot of greatness that they got to be around. And for that year, they got to rub shoulders with a first-round pick, see how he went about his work every day, see how he always showed up, always played, was running down the biggest play of the season, that Miami game, making that tackle on third down from across the field. That stuff resonates, and I just think it can impact an entire team. But as far but I think more than anything, it goes to Norvell and his coaches, right? I mean, if you want to give it to a player, I think Jermaine's the guy. But I think the real answer is just Norvell and what he believes in and what he preaches.
Yeah, I don't have anything better to say, so we'll go to the next question.
Well, I didn't answer the leadership.
All right, go for it.
I don't know.
Thank you.
There's your answer. Look, I don't know that they have one on offense. And Aslan's got a good point. It's hard for us to know because it's not like – I don't even know what leadership – what people think leadership looks like on the offensive side of the ball. Like Jordan Travis, I think, is a good leader. He's not a real vocal kid. He's not screaming down his teammates. But even if he did, nobody could hear him because the music's playing. Right. And I'm talking about team stuff. Like, you wouldn't be able to hear him anyway. So I think, as Aslan alluded to, I think a lot of the leadership is in the rooms. When they're watching film, when they're going over game plans, and just getting to see the way Jordan works. And apparently he really does bust his butt in film study. He does ask a lot of questions. He is kind of a coach on the field. I think that leadership matters. And I think Norvell brought it up on after Sunday scrimmage. Somebody like Shaheem, even though he's done with the scrimmage for the day, being back behind him, with him. So if you can picture it, and I assume they do this in the scrimmage. We don't get to watch. But during the regular plays of a team portion of practice, the line of scrimmage is, let's say, the 25. Norvell is, let's say, the other 40. Watching how the play develops, watching the plays, and then if he needs somebody, he comes over and calls him over. Fuller's there too, like 35 yards behind in front of the line of scrimmage. Well, apparently that's where Shaheem Brown was during the scrimmage. Norvell said, when he was done playing, he was over there with him, shouting encouragement to the younger safeties and also helping coach the younger safeties. And we've seen Noles do that a lot. That's leadership, man. Like Jared Verse, I guess he's an emotional leader. I'm not disputing that because I do think that they especially the defensive guys, he gives them a sense of confidence because he's so talkative and believes in himself so much. But I don't know if he's quite the leader that kind of leadership is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like he's more of a trash talker, look how good I am. You can't block me. And I think that stuff is important too, because I think it instills confidence in the guys around them that they play with somebody that's that good and that cocky and that confident and is destroying folks. It just builds everybody up. And you can see it with Patrick Payton. I think Patrick Payton, he skips every now and again when he makes a play. He'll skip and talk trash to the offense. Like I think that matters and that's good, but I also think they have leaders that are quieter, that are more like coaches. It's not Telvin shouting at Jameis, telling him he's coming, all that stuff that happened that we heard about in the 13 season. I think it's different kinds of leaders.
Oh, I was going to keep this as the last one, but let's just go to this one now then. It's our guy Jernal, 1518. Hey, how's on it, Corey? I'm a long-time Wake Up JCS headlines listener, but I finally decided to make the leap and became a Warchant subscriber.
There we go.
Oh, man, Jer, what's up? Hopefully you took advantage of that 25% off a year.
Or hopefully not, honestly.
Right, yeah.
What are you talking about?
We need some of y'all to start paying full freight, all right? Come on.
Step
up, guys. I've written some nonsensical would you rather questions into headlines over the years, but for my first Renegade Express question, I will keep it football-centric. There has been some sentiment of comparing what this year's team could be to what the 2013 team was. While it's not unreasonable to think that the 23 team could have a similar run to the 13 team, I think a better comparison for this team in terms of talent and experience might be the 2014 team. With that said, which team do you think would win between 2014 and this year's team in a best-of-7 series? Let's assume full health for each squad. Thanks for your excellent coverage of FSU athletics, and I hope to meet y'all in Orlando.
The 14 team. Now, the 2023 team would get out to probably a 17-3 lead. Maybe 20-3, but Jameis would lead them back. And look, it's just they got, what was Jameis, 28-1 as a starting quarterback? In the one game he lost was to the national runner-up in a playoff game where his team turned it over 7 times. If that doesn't happen, I just wouldn't expect this team to be able to beat that team. That team was still, I know it was a dentist visit every Saturday. But it was painful and it was a grind, but that team, I don't know how you bet against that team. They won all but the last one.
Yeah.
But it'd be close because all that team did was play close games. And they had a better kicker.
They did. But it's sacrilege. I just can't go against Jameis right now. Can't do it. Can't do it. But at the same time, if this team fulfills its potential, we'll be talking about it right behind that team probably, ironically enough, if they can fulfill the potential that we've kind of foisted upon them. Sorry, not hoisted.
Yeah, and I don't think I mean, look, they can win a national championship. Look, this team is certainly, I think, more talented and capable than the TCU team of last year was, and that team got to the final game of the season. Now, they got obliterated, but things break a certain way, or if Georgia loses to Ohio State and then C.J. Stroud gets sick, give yourself a chance, get in that game. I think Florida State's potential is certainly a championship win if things break a certain way and they get some luck, injury, and otherwise. But, I think you and I think the potential of this team, let's take the playoffs out of it. Let's just say the potential of this team is 12-1, 11-2 ACC champs. Somewhere in that range, right?
Yeah, you're talking about 10 wins yesterday, Corey.
I'm saying I'd still be I'd be okay with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but don't you think that's kind of the potential? Nobody goes undefeated anymore, so I'm not expecting them to go undefeated in the regular season. And there's going to be a game they should win comfortably that they won't. They might win it, but it's going to be way closer than it should be. But I just think that the potential of this team, the way it's currently constructed, and the way the health currently is an 10 or 11 win team, maybe 11-2, but an ACC championship is certainly well within reach. Which kind of last year was too. If they hadn't stumbled around in Raleigh, they might have had a chance last year.
I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I think about how, you've talked about the experience of this team. I feel inexperience is what makes those situations happen. That game that you're supposed to win comfortably, but somehow ends up being a game that comes down to the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. And I also want to check myself and pump the brakes and not talk about this team being like 2013 and just blowing everybody off the football field. But, like, if you look at it pragmatically, I guess you have to factor in just the way college football is and how you talk about it's moving closer and closer to the NFL in terms of, everything kind of comes down. These big games come down to the fourth quarter so many times. But I just think about, and people are like, well, we got to see how Norvell handles himself in tight situations and games. It's like, man, every fan base can point to a game management situation that their coach had a blunder on. Like, I don't think Norvell is any more immune to it. I don't think he's any more prone to choking in a big situation either. But I think about this quarterback. I just think about all the experience. I mean, guys like Jared Verse, Fabian, Fisk. I know Patrick Payne isn't experienced, but, man, Patrick Payne, like, he's a sharp kid. And when you listen to the way he talks, the way that, Papucha says that he's a technician, he's got finesse to his game. It's not just speed and power. Tatum Bethune's played so much freaking football. Renardo Green's been around a while. It's just, you think about all this and you're like, where do they get tight? Where do these things happen? Where do they have the lapse of judgment where they blow an assignment and then they end up putting themselves into a bad situation? It happens to the best of teams, but I'm just, with this schedule, it's hard. It's probably going to happen, like Corey said. I don't know where it happens, and I just think ultimately they'll figure out a way to dig out of it if it does happen.
And you know what is a good experience? They are experienced. It's a very experienced team, but it's also, that 1 month after the Clemson game, they're also experienced in beating the bejesus out of other teams. There's not a lot of college football players in the country that don't live in Athens or, I guess, Tuscaloosa that had a month where they beat a team 41-16, 45-3, 38-3, and 49-17. Like, just absolute butt whippings 4 weeks in a row. That's not the norm in college football. So to Aslan's point, yeah, they showed, like, after that Miami game, doing what they did at Miami, that's the best feeling that 90% of those college football those players on the Florida State team had ever had. Probably the best feeling Norvell's ever had. To go into their stadium of your rival and beat a beat down like that 2 years after what they did to you during COVID was incredible. And to show how grown up and mature they were, the next week on the road against a capable bowl Syracuse team, they beat them 38-3. Like they didn't take their foot off the gas at all. They didn't let up at all. They didn't even let Syracuse get in that game. That's a good sign. That's a mature team, and this team is even more mature than that team. So with that, yeah, look, there are going to be some close games because the talent disparity will be close. But yeah, they, as Aslan pointed out, they do have a nice track record of, the Boston College game too. They had 5 wins with like over 28 points. That's not many other teams in the country can say that. Well, 6 wins if you count Duquesne. So 6 wins with over at least 28 to 30 points. 6 blowout wins. That's good, man. Right?
Yeah, and then the tight games against Florida and Oklahoma, they found a way to win.
Yeah.
So it's like they've gone through it all. But anyhow, let's.
And they had a 3-game losing streak.
They did.
Sprinkled in there too somehow.
A couple more. I know it's ran long, but hopefully you're all still here, awake, taking your vitamin energy. Austin 65647. Howdy, fellas. If I were to set the over/under at 2.5 kick return touchdowns and punt return touchdowns, over or under?
Under.
Okay.
I mean, it was one last year, right? They've only had one since Norvell got here, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think they've returned a punt for a touchdown since he got here. Heck, half the time they wouldn't even catch a punt because you can't return one for a touchdown if you don't catch it. So, no, I think you're looking at one.
Wait, no. What didn't that whole the trickeration against NC State and Raleigh this past year with Pokey, like they called for fair catch, but the punt got kicked to the other side of the field. Did he return that for a touchdown or no?
No, it set up the Fitzgerald long field goal.
Oh, okay.
Right before half. So yeah, I think
DJ Matthews against Miami probably is the last one then.
Yep, and that was a former coaching staff. So and then Benson had the kick return against Boston College, but that was the only one. So I would say under.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Key West Knoll. What's up, fellas? Love the show. I listen every morning while I'm walking my dog. Kona says go Noles. He provided a photo. Adorable dog.
What kind of dog is it?
With a Florida State jersey on it. Multiple breeds.
Okay.
Tough to pin down. Tough to pin down. Of all the things to be hyped about with this team, I think I'm most excited about the new jerseys. They look so clean. We actually look like FSU again. Where would y'all rank them on the all-time Florida State jersey list? And is there much buzz around them with the team? Thanks, guys. Maybe we can ask the players next time we talk to them how they think about the new uniforms, but it's not something that's come up here recently. I probably put them somewhere between circa their third, 2013 circa, and then 97, maybe second, and then this jersey. I'll put this iteration of it at third. But okay. I don't know. I haven't seen. I need to see a color photo of the Bolitnikoff, Ron Sellers days, because I might like those, because everything comes around fashion-wise. So I might like those. So this is a tough thing to really grade accurately.
I also want to see these new uniforms up close and personal, and I want to see them under the lights. I want to see them in action before I make a judgment. So yeah, for now we'll just go with Aslan's rankings.
Okay. Let's take this last one. I haven't even screened it, but let's go with it. Dalvinism, wake up. One last offseason hypothetical before we move on to the real thing. Since I think it's safe to say we've moved on from the real dark days of 2017 to 2021, I'm curious who you think was the single worst team of that run. Was it Willie's first season? Was it the COVID season? If you lined up the 17 to 21 teams next to each other, who are you picking last? I like the way he framed that one. All right. At first, it felt kind of mean-spirited, but if they were kids on a playground and we're picking teams, that 2020 team was rough. Was really, really
especially
rough.
Because look, all the things that just COVID crushed that team. Not crush it as in they all got sick from COVID, although they all did, but more like all college football teams did. More like just like there was no time to grow or be a team, or it just I don't even know what they did for the locker rooms in 2020. Did they even sit next to each other in the locker rooms? Right. I just think that hurt cohesion a little bit, especially for a new staff. It's either 2018 or 2020. 2020, when Jordan Travis was healthy, was at least a pretty good offense. Oh. Now, it was all him, but at least it was a pretty good offense. And when Tamori and Terry was healthy, which was, I think, 1.5 against Notre Dame, that was at least a pretty good offense. There was nothing all that redeeming about 18, although they did have Akers. But the offensive lines were both just gross. I think 18's was worse, though. But that 2020 defense is the single worst defense that Florida State football has ever put on a football field. And I'm going way back to the 40s. I'm going back to pre-Cigar Bowl days. That was the worst defense that Florida State's ever put on a football field. So I guess I would still go with 2020. And again, as bad as those numbers were, they didn't have to play Clemson or Florida that year. If they would have played Trevor Lawrence and Trask and Kyle Pitts and those teams. And who was the running back for Clemson that was so good? Etienne. I mean, come on, man. Both of those teams could have scored 80 points if they wanted to.
Wake Forest and Virginia, they, I think, ended up not playing. And that was the year that Virginia's quarterback threw for 40-something touchdowns. Brennan Armstrong, and Sam Hartman was still doing Sam Hartman things. So
yeah, so they got lucky. And the only team they added to the schedule at the end was Duke. Yep. Just for another game. And they gave up 35 to that team. And that Duke team, I think, got shut out the week before against Miami or something. So, no, 2020 is the worst because of the defense. It was disgusting and gross. And then I think honestly, if you just – I would say 2021 was probably the best one. R17 out of that crew. I think 2021 started horribly, but by the end of the year was playing well enough that it, I think, would have beaten the other FSU teams.
I'll take 17. It was the same situation. I mean, 17 walked into the swamp, beat an interim coach. 2021 team walked into the swamp, interim coach, and couldn't kick an onside kick and whiffed on it. So I'll go with 17.
That was a wrap. That was a good way to wrap up that special team season, as an onside kick that gets hit just enough to fall forward by I've never seen that before or since. Yeah. An all-time onside kick.
We deserve this, everybody. We deserve all the good that's coming our way.
Absolutely.
We deserve it. Just remember that.
This show more than anybody. We started this show. When did we start this show?
2018, February 2018.
February of 2018. Yeah. I mean, come on, man. It was 4 years of essentially misery. Yeah. And then we finally got to start talking about some good stuff again.
Yeah. We're glad you've all been here for it. We appreciate it. Tell a friend. Hit the thumbs up on the way out as well. We'll get to the rest of these Renegade Express questions on tomorrow's program, and they'll return to practice on Wednesday, so we'll have some actual, in season practice sort of stuff to talk about, which we all love. So be on the lookout for that. Seminole headlines 1 to 3 o'clock. In the meantime, Jeff Cameron Show the rest of the week 1 to 3 o'clock. We'll be live Thursday 6 p.m. So join us for that as well. He's Corey. I'm Maason. Thank you for listening to Wake Up Warchant, presented by the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill.